Well, good afternoon, Scott Baker. How are you today?
Um, yeah, good. I think pretty good. Um, how about you?
I'm great. Thank you. Had a great
Yeah.
meeting. No one yelled at
Yes,
each other. It was fantastic.
uh, that's always a good measure. Yeah, it's like, and there was a lot of rich stuff discussed. Hope everybody else that's joining us here for Lead Better, listening later, that you're having a great day too. Hopefully, you'll even be doing better after this short meditation, reflection, pondering of today's field note, which has a unique title, and it is field note number 1723. Colleagues who agree and then run a different play. Cool. Yeah. We kind of know what that means, right? You now I guess the question would be, and let me frame it this way. So, which is worse? And think about this. Put yourself in this position. Somebody who openly disagrees with you, or somebody who says they agree with you, but then they quietly sabotage your plan.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
we would all kind of say the second person is worse, right?
Yes. And this is a parable in Scripture that's brought up this way as well. That you'd much rather have the person who kind of declines you to begin with, but then eventually joins the kingdom, right? As opposed to
Okay, right.
somebody who kind of sabotages all the way along while giving lip service the whole time.
Yeah. Well, look, as we go into this serpent-like behavior, we can kind of then decide, how does this come about? What are the motives? What's the human psychology underlying all of this? Then let's look for the leadership behavioral aspect, to this. And there's an interesting element in this field note that says, when this is happening, just conversation, just like, wait, why are you doing it? That maybe that doesn't work. That they're actually, to get this back on track, requires something different and structural. And then we can look at what we think about, the merits of all of that. Because I think there are probably, I didn't check the comments on the field note today, but I can imagine some people being a little divided on this one. Do you think?
Well, respectfully to the person who commented this, I don't think they saw the paragraph that kind of created the exclusion that they were talking about. And their first reaction was, how about we probe to find out why the person is behaving this way?
Right. Yes. Right.
And
Which is a
so
good question.
which is a great question, except for the fact that it is answered in the field note. Like, this is a
Hmm.
pretty specific type that we're going after,
Hmm.
because we do mention in the field note that the solid advice of experienced leaders is to clarify the agreements more explicitly, right?
Hmm.
Unfortunately, that recommendation works best only when people are operating in good faith, right?
Yeah.
That
Right.
they're not intentionally meaning to misdirect or mislead. And there is an occasional person on your team who might pop up who seems to be
Hmm.
sabotaging on purpose, who seems to be
Yes.
like intentionally saying one thing and then doing the other. So, if an occasion comes up where you're able to say, this isn't like you, tell me what's going on, obviously that would be the advice for most leaders. But there are people who might have in a conversation who would say, this isn't like you, tell me what's going on, continue to get lip service. And then for whatever reason, they're not going to give you that, right? So if someone is being that passive aggressive, you asking that question is likely going to result in more passive aggressive behavior. They're not going to be straightforward with you. And
Hmm.
so the
Right.
question becomes, how do you deal with that kind of miscreant on your team? Hopefully you don't have
Yeah.
very many, but that's where it becomes difficult, is confronting
Yeah.
a
Not
miscreant.
the person who just, it's not the one off. It's more of like, there's a consistent reason here. Now, the commenter could still be partially right, meaning,
Mhm.
well, let's actually figure this out. Because if you actually said to the person who's the subterfuge disagreeer, um,
Mhm.
why are you consistently doing this? They might be, because you guys are idiots. Like, I've been telling you this for a long time.
Right.
Look at our results over the last 7 years, right? It's just been stagnant. Like, you're just going nowhere. Like, okay, I'm here. You're paying me, but doesn't make any sense for me to go keep working on the stuff that is clearly taking us into the tank. Like, they might have a reason like that. Oh, well, let's talk about the merits of that. But look at it this way: that the when the field note is then saying that if you have these people that are in this sort of track or pattern of behavior, the field note is saying the only thing that actually works is if you can quash all of this by structure.
Hmm.
In fact, quashed by structure is again a very vivid sentence or phrase here in our field note. More than not that we think that all field notes should be very memorable, but quashed
Mhm.
by structure is not a bad way. Now, obviously, then you go, well, what do you mean by structure, right? And that we can look at that. But just to that point, before we get into the details, did that make sense or feel right to you to be like, okay, I've got to put in a system here that actually contains this?
It totally makes sense for me because
Hmm.
I live with one of these people
Okay, right.
who, will say one thing and then just do completely different forever and ever.
Hmm.
And my wife and I have found that
Hmm.
the way that we are kind of forced to engage with this child is exactly that way, full structure.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
sometimes we catch ourselves saying, which I'm sure
Yep.
leaders would be the same way. I wish I didn't have to be a warden in this situation
Yes. Right. Right.
because I wouldn't. I would, and going through the process of saying, let's publicly say exactly what you mean by this, and these are the benchmarks. Even before we
Hmm.
instill structure, let's just get you to publicly commit that what you're saying, this is what you mean. We're going to define it a little bit, and here's the date that's involved, right? And you do that in ways that people can save face, and you do that in ways that aren't going to embarrass people. But even when you do that, it's still not being met, then you're left with the alternative of basically ramping it up and saying, well, the
Hmm.
structure now needs to exist. And the odd part is that in our family, and perhaps it works this way in organizations as well, is that you're just creating structure for a single person,
Right. Yeah.
which can sometimes be an occasion where people are like, no one else has to live by these rules. But the
Right.
documentation that you've already gone through shows, yeah, and this is why, right? So having to say that in a kind way, having to say that in a way that shows that you're still rooting for this person is difficult, but it does. It makes you feel like a warden, and no one wants to operate that way, but here's how you do it.
Yeah. Well, and obviously that if you have somebody on the team, maybe the question is not the opposition or what the commenter raised by saying, well, why don't you check in on why this person is subverting this? This would really be a question if this is persistent. Why do you have this person on the team? Now, you must recognize some value in them, but that's a bigger
Yes.
question. In fact, it might be harder to change this person than it would be to replace them. And I think that's
Yes.
a really significant question for the leader. Now, I
Right.
do think that the likelihood, and it goes into then the pieces of this. Let's do some documentation. Let's get things kind of written down. Let's require certain communication check-ins, on this. And then as you're tracking progress and being like, all right, we started this, we're doing this. By the way, Susie, where are you on that? Were you able to contact the people you said you were going to contact? You're kind of creating accountability. And I think what happens a lot of times, why this sort of festers or proliferates in organizations, is the leaders are a little too lazy to kind of just stay after it, right? They may not have an initiative. They're not putting in the time themselves to be disciplined
Mhm.
around the structure. If the leader just has a little bit of structure in the way that they kind of say, what's the status on that? These are low key ways before you say, well, you said you were going to contact that client. And so I printed out this document where I'd like you to sign saying that by Thursday, I will, like, no top performer of any kind is going to be like, you want me to sign a paper and get it notarized that I'm going to actually make a call to a potential client by Thursday? I mean,
Right.
if the messages leave the organization, then it's probably pretty effective, right? So
Right.
in the meantime, much of this in terms of documentation, status, check-ins could probably be done fairly with a fairly low degree of power flex, as we would
Mhm.
say. But a lot of this comes down to how we work with a Mikey Ames favorite, which is the levels of consensus. I just screwed that
Yes.
up, man, because you have
No,
to
that's
kind of
fine.
say it consensus right. Wait, hold on a second. Back up. The levels of consensus, and I don't have a
So
reverb effect to add to that, but yeah.
Brendan and Coleman in Substack kind of stole your thunder a little bit. He
Ah,
mentioned accountability is hard to digest sometimes, especially coming from a party that doesn't want to. And
mhm,
so if someone's level of consensus right there is like, nope, not going to do it,
mhm,
then it could be a gentle way of like showing them the door. Like you're dealing with someone who has been kind of working against you for a long time. Now you're
Mhm.
going to turn up the heat in such a way that you have to live within structure that not everybody has to live within, but you've kind of shown yourself this way. You're also showing that you don't have any consensus that says, I'm going to allow myself to be subjected to this kind of accountability.
Mhm.
I don't
Right.
want to get better in the way that you're defining it. So if you're saying, well, therefore, this is the structure that we use, a lot of people you would think would basically usher themselves out at that point.
Yeah.
And
Right.
they would have they're going to blame you for it. They're going to be like,
Mhm.
my boss now has unreasonable expectations around reporting that he didn't have for anybody else. And they'll be telling their story in a certain way that basically protects their own credibility and their accountability in all of
Mhm.
this. But, you staying true to that might be now, I'm not saying this is a backhanded way for you to show somebody the door, but if they're not like, that's oftentimes going to be the case, won't it? Is like people are going to just quit as a result of being put under that kind of subjection that no one else in the building has to live with.
Yeah. Now, that's actually part of some of the content we have in our main, subscriber behavior platform. There is a lot in this. There's 42 different other field notes that could be written based on this one. But one of the things that's interesting here that actually is sort of the title of it is a story that's told in our behavior platform by Montana, and I think this must have happened before I joined the organization 9 years ago. I have a slight recollection that maybe I was there for this, but it didn't jump out to me. But when we recorded the ideas around a particular behavior, this story came out. It was about a hockey team, and the person that was talking to our organization was a retired NHL player. Now, we've, by the way, had a lot of people in the sports world speak to our firm, both in public forums where we're having a community conference, people that run world-class organizations, cycling teams, diving teams, Olympic, teams, all kinds of things. And then sometimes they're private sessions behind just for our team. There's an upcoming PGA championship in Pennsylvania in May. And the guy that is in charge of organizing all of that came and spoke to our firm. It was unbelievably interesting. And it
Mhm.
wasn't anything that was, part of one of our community conferences. I'm just giving you what happens when people start to get candid with people that are really interested in what excellence looks like and what leadership looks like. And this NHL player was kind of candid, said, there was a time when we had a coach that came in and everybody on the team, so it wasn't one person, it was everybody on the team was like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And
Mm.
very often, maybe it's during the in between periods and they're in the break and the coach is like, all right, here's what we got to do. This is it. We're going to do this. And everybody go like, all right, yes, coach, break. Hockey players don't, it's hard to do that with the gloves, but then their whole rule was we're going to listen, we're going to agree with the coach, and then we all actually know what to do. We're going to go out and just do that. And they just did that, and they would win that way by
I, I
totally
always
ignoring.
I always wondered in that story as if that coach's awareness of the situation was so low that he didn't even recognize that they
Didn't even.
ignored him.
I bet that might be the case. Now, that is not a long-term recipe for success, for
No, not at
sure,
all.
right? Right. But maybe in that moment they thought, well, look, can we get to the playoffs this year? Like whatever it was, that was what the team together decided. And I do think that you can imagine in reading this field note, there are places where like people were like, this particular leader beat down a team or beat down a particular person so long that they just didn't care anymore. And that's a bad thing, by the way. If you're as a leader are doing things that make the people that care most about your organization do care less about your organization or just run another play, then you got some big problems yourself. So I think the best way this field note works is if you're looking at the person who's resisting, but also looking really careful at yourself about what you did to contribute to how this is playing out, and then be a part of that solution. If you're requiring commitment on their part, check-ins, all kinds of things, then you're part of that too, right? Then I
Right.
think it has a chance of working.
Right. Okay. So can we get more specific on some of these? I know that we've got 5 seconds left,
Yeah.
but the some of this documentation and structure might have some
Mhm.
nuance in the way that it's kind
Mhm.
of applied. So to insist on written rationale for any change in direction,
Mhm.
like um, that almost needs to be like the third degree part, right? You can't insist on written rationale unless you've already agreed
It's got
the
you're at the end
rationale
of the
is
game here on
unreformed,
this one. Yeah, right.
right? And so at that point, it might feel like I'm just piling more tedious work on this person, and it
Mhm.
feels like I'm really just encouraging them to quit, right?
Yeah.
So
And
is it
in a way, there is research that does say that the more structure that's put on organizations for compliance does lead to the team feeling less trusted, and therefore
right?
it removes intrinsic motivation. So if it's something that everybody should be like, if the leader hasn't done a good job of either explaining the strategy or creating the vision, or more, as Charlie Munger used to talk about, what are the incentives?
Right,
If you can be talking about the incentives for everybody, you probably shouldn't be talking about anything else, because if you get
right.
that right, then those things take care of themselves. Because usually if people check out, it's because they don't actually think that it's going to work out for the team or them. And that may not
Yes.
just be financially. It may just be in
Yeah.
satisfaction or whatever it is, just the pleasure and joy of creating something.
Yes, which is why high performing teams don't have that kind of structure that we're talking about. So
Yeah,
if you have
right.
to instill it for a single person, you're kind of culturally pointing out to everybody else, this person is not with us for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Now, it doesn't mean that this is what you do when you actually want to march somebody out the door. There's other ways to be able to deal with it. But for someone who is you feel like they've got the potential and could be redeemed, this high structure might be the only way left to do it, even though there's probably not a
Mhm.
high success rate of redemption here. Is
Either way, right? I think so,
right,
and I guess in a way, the field note at the end kind of points to that, and we can, you could have inverted these sentences because it starts with good news and goes to bad news, but it could have been the other way around, because it
right,
says the good news is that when you have these visible processes that would, and here's the manipulative word in a way, outmaneuver these hidden agendas, right? That's what's happening with the person resisting. The bad news is, and this is the thing you always have to remember, you might get compliance. But it's if this is a character problem, right? It's not going. This is the bad behavior doesn't repair the distrust that actually exists in the team or between the leader and the team member, and it doesn't change the fact that for the leader and probably other people on the team, that it's just exhausting to deal with a colleague like that.
right. Great. Well, I appreciate it. Brandon, thanks for all your great comments in
Hmm.
chat as well. Anybody who wants to join us for these 15 minutes, we love that kind of participation, and we'll mention them as they keep going. And then there's a recording. If you missed the first couple minutes, you can go back and watch this. We try to keep it at 15 minutes. You'll see that we're 3 minutes over today, but we do this every day, one leadership topic at a time. And we'll look forward
And
to
you can
seeing you
subscribe
tomorrow.
on your podcast apps too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks, Scott. Good to see you. We'll see
See
you
you.
tomorrow.